I built a road on my own land to keep the farm breathing. 2 full months. Clearing thick brush, scraping and grading dirt, hauling load after load of gravel. All paid from my pocket, every shovel full, every tire track. The morning it was finally done, the HOA showed up and planted a heavy steel gate straight across it. Then came the invoice, $300 a month to use the road I had built myself. They figured I'd lose my temper, hook a chain to the tractor, and yank it down in a rage. They misjudged me. I never touched the gate. Instead, I dismantled the people behind it, legally, methodically, completely. I remember standing in the pale dawn light, coffee mug still steaming in my grip, staring at that gate as though it had sprouted from the earth overnight. Thick square posts set deep in fresh-poured concrete. Keypad mounted at chest height. A compact black camera tilted exactly toward a driver's face. The perfect angle if someone lost control. The sign was crisp, almost sterile. Authorized vehicles only. Road access fee, $300 per month. Managed by Access Management LLC. No county emblem. No HOA logo. Just a plain corporate name demanding payment. That absence of official markings was the first red flag. This wasn't a courtesy notice or even a formal warning. It was a bill. I had spent weeks battling rocks, roots, and relentless heat to resurrect that route. Coming home caked in dust, hands numb from equipment vibration, back knotted in the silent way you don't whine about when the job actually means something. That road wasn't pavement, it was survival. The day before, I drove it end to end for the first time. Slow, deliberate, gravel popping under the tires like quiet applause. No detours, no posted restrictions, no one telling me which way I could go. Felt open, silent, mine. Now a barrier stood there, a price sticker slapped on my independence. I could already imagine the chorus online. It's your property. Rip it down. Nobody can block your own road. Chain it and drag it. They weren't entirely wrong. I owned the tools. I had the power. Legally the right was on my side. But the moment I saw that gate, I recognized the trap. They weren't trying to stop me. They were daring me to explode. One swing and I'd hand them the perfect video, the perfect headline. So I chose the longer path. Quiet, patient, devastating in a way they never saw coming. This story isn't really about asphalt or gravel. It's about what happens when someone decides your labor is worth less than their regulations. My ground sits in the northern reach of Clearbrook County, where the treeline finally yields to open fields. My people have held this soil longer than the subdivision markers have existed. Long before manicured lawns, restrictive covenants, and boards of directors telling grown adults how much noise their lives are permitted to make. My grandfather worked on it. My father worked on it. Not for wealth or leisure, but because land you pour sweat and blood into long enough stops being an asset. It becomes a duty. We never had cushions, no vacation properties, no stock accounts, no safety nets woven from promises on paper. What we had was dirt. Dirt we paid taxes on every year. Dirt we broke ourselves against. Dirt that kept food on the table when everything else failed. That dirt taught its own lessons early. Real order isn't decreed from above. It's earned through seasons, repetition, rhythm. You don't vote it in. You live it until it's part of you. Clearbrook Meadows never grasped that. They liked the romantic notion of farmland nearby. The golden hour views, the pastoral quiet, the picture postcard charm. But they hated the realities. Dust clouds, diesel fumes, engines starting before sunrise. They wanted the fields preserved like museum pieces behind glass, unchanging, silent. At first I stayed invisible. I drove slowly past their houses. I waved. I smiled. I kept to myself. Their covenants didn't reach me, until they did. Heavy equipment prohibited between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m., precisely the hours farming demands. Permits required for excessive traffic. Fines for dust. Warnings labeled as noise complaints even when all I was doing was working. They packaged it as safety, harmony, and quality of life. But corn doesn't follow HOA schedules. Cattle don't attend board meetings. Buyers don't pause while you beg for permission slips. I tried to comply. Deliveries at first light or after dusk. trucks rolling in darkness. Days reshaped around rules written by people who'd never mucked a stall or repaired fence in pouring rain. It still wasn't enough. One delayed load became two. Two became a lost contract. A buyer who dealt with my father for 2 decades called, not furious, just matter of fact. I can't keep waiting. I've got my own margins. That's how erosion really happens. Not in one dramatic flood. In steady, incremental pressure until the ground gives. Late one night I sat at the kitchen table. Invoices fanned out, coffee long cold. The columns refused to balance. They didn't care how many years my family had held this place or how hard I fought to keep it. I pictured my father's face if he saw me begging strangers for the right to reach my own barn. The slow headshake. Not rage, just sorrow. That was when the truth settled in. This wasn't about regulations or neighborly peace. It was about dominance, whether a man who actually worked land still had the authority to reach it on his own schedule, whether heritage carried weight once a committee decided it spoiled the scenery. Once that clicked, I stopped searching for middle ground. That's when the old road came back to mind. It wasn't a sudden discovery. It surfaced the way buried truths usually do, quietly, when you finally quit deceiving yourself. I was idling outside the HOA office one morning, engine running, steeling myself to walk in and plead for permission to continue the same labor my bloodline had performed for generations. I stared at the glass doors, the tidy office hours sign, and realized how absurd it was that my living depended on whether strangers approved the sound of my truck. That's when the memory hit. The back pasture. Beyond the far fence, past the cottonwood stand. A forgotten strip of ground choked with brush and young trees. As a boy, I'd barely registered my father's offhand remark. Used to be a service road back in there. The county built it before the new highway came through. Back then it meant nothing. Kids don't worry about access. They assume it's eternal. But sitting in that truck, staring at a door I refused to enter, the memory carried a different weight. I killed the engine, never went inside, sat a moment longer with hands on the wheel, and chose a different direction. I drove home, spread every map I owned across the table, county plats, faded surveys, old PDFs dredged from digital archives that looked untouched since the dial-up era. Hours later I found it. A faint line marked unmaintained public right-of-way, a portion sliced directly across my deeded land. The rest skirted the edge, abandoned for decades. It wasn't a trick or a clever workaround. It was simply something the newcomers had never bothered to learn existed. I called my daughter Ellie that night. She's in civil engineering at the local community college, sharp, reserved until the moment counts, the kind of mind that finds order in chaos. I sent her the files without explanation. She didn't question. She just said, "I'll look." The next evening we walked the overgrown trail together. Saplings thick as fence posts. Thorn vines coiled like tripwires. Rusted barbed wire half buried in soil. Ellie moved deliberately, survey pole in hand, noting grades, drainage patterns, water flow. She spoke little. When she finally straightened, she said simply, "It's possible, but it'll be brutal." I smiled. Brutal had kept this place alive longer than polite ever would. Lane showed up the day after. High school friend. The sort who can rebuild a diesel motor with fence wire and sheer will. He arrived towing gear older than most HOA covenants and twice as dependable brush hog, grater blade, an ancient case dozer that still growled when treated right. The three of us stood at first light facing a green wall that had devoured the old alignment. Lane spat into the dirt. "Damn ugly spot for a road." "Exactly," I said, because this wasn't easy anymore. It was about owning our own way in and out. We moved carefully. No shortcuts. Ellie rechecked every slope and swale so runoff would stay where nature intended. Lane chewed through brush inch by inch, engine snarling resentment at every vine. I hauled away the carnage. Snapped saplings, rotted posts, decades of discarded junk. By week's end it looked less like progress and more like bone-deep fatigue. But something fundamental had already shifted. I no longer waited for approval. And once you stop asking, the earth beneath you feels wider. Work that is honest doesn't stay hidden. Clear enough brush and eventually someone notices, Not because they care what you're making, but because you didn't request their blessing first. The first signal came not in ink but in person. A woman appeared at the fence line one morning, heels sinking into soil never meant for them. I heard the click-clack before I saw her, out of place in a soundscape of diesel, wind, and boots. She watched silently for a while, clipboard under arm, sunglasses reflecting nothing. Then, "Good morning. I'm with Clearbrook Meadows HOA. I killed the engine, climbed down, wiped palms on jeans." "Morning." She didn't ask names or purpose. Her gaze followed the cleared corridor like she was committing it to memory. "We've received concerns about this construction." The word landed like a brick, chosen with precision. Concerns from whom? Practiced smile. Residents. Erosion. Increased traffic. Potential impact on the community views. I nearly laughed aloud. The viewshed, she mourned, was open fields and treeline that had stood long before cul-de-sacs and concrete were poured. She spoke as though my work could fracture the sky itself. I explained the drainage. Slope to carry water away from their lots, back into my pasture as it always had. Offered to show maps. She waved it away. Even so, the HOA has a duty to maintain aesthetic harmony and environmental integrity. Aesthetic harmony. A phrase so elastic you could drive heavy machinery through it and still claim obedience. I mentioned the easement, the public right-of-way, the surveys. She repeated that any change affecting the broader community required oversight. I didn't argue. I simply said, "This is my land. The road is on it." Her pen froze. For the first time she met my eyes over the clipboard rim. "We'll need to review. In the meantime, I'd advise halting further activity." Advice. Another velvet glove over steel. She left the same way she arrived, heels clicking discordantly. Lane watched her retreat. "That wasn't about dirt." "No," I said. "That was about asking permission." The letters arrived soon after. Courteous. Heavy stock. Never cease. Always review pending. Never illegal. Always potential impact. Broad citations of bylaws concerning visual continuity, runoff liability, traffic patterns, language loose enough to stretch however the board wished. They didn't claim the title. They claimed concern. That's how modern control operates when it wears polish. It never seizes outright. It encircles with words, calls itself stewardship, calls itself duty. While you're busy proving innocence, the lines quietly redraw themselves. I read each letter twice, not for offense, for motive. What struck me most wasn't the accusations. It was the omissions. No request for drainage calcs. No demand for engineering stamps. No invitation to submit mitigation. Authority presumed first, evidence optional. They weren't afraid of runoff or aesthetics. They feared precedent. One man stops asking, others might remember they never had to. We kept moving, steady, not rushed. Nothing unsettles rulemakers more than someone obeying law while refusing to pause. Between one letter and the next sunrise, I realized this had stopped being about a road's legality. It had become about whether they would permit me to live beyond their reach. They hadn't halted me yet, but they were closing in. Clearing brush beneath summer sun leaves no room for fury. The body takes charge. The mind trails behind, finally silent. Swing, cut, drag, stack, repeat. You don't bargain with thorns or roots. You simply persist until the land relents. That first week progress resembled punishment. Sweat blinding, gloves drenched, blisters rising anyway. Lane ran the brush hog patiently, engine grumbling like an old bear still willing to fight. Ellie paced ahead in her vest, pole marking grades, crouching now and then to read soil like scripture. I hauled wreckage, thick branches, rusted wire, relics of long neglect. By dusk we were filthy head to toe, dust glued to sweat, shoulders scorched, backs aching in the truthful way that confirms real work. There was calm in it, not the sanitized version offered in meeting rooms where harmony always costs someone else. This was earned quietly, the kind that sinks into bone when the body is spent and thought finally stills. Evenings we perched on the truck tailgate, boots hanging, eating whatever we'd packed at dawn. Ham sandwiches, bruised apples, lukewarm water. Conversation stayed sparse. We didn't need much. We watched the raw corridor catch dying light and felt something alive begin to breathe. One night, Ellie wiped sweat with a glove back and said quietly, "Roads aren't just for leaving. They're for returning." I looked at her longer than usual. Sometimes your children speak a truth that hits harder than any debate. Lane chuckled. "Keep that up and we'll stencil your sayings on the barn wall." She flicked a pebble at him. We laughed, the tired, good kind. By week 2, the land began to yield. Brush retreated. Earth showed itself, hard here, softer there. Lane brought the grader. Metal sang against dirt in something almost sacred. Ellie recalculated every angle so water would follow gravity. Not wishful thinking. Gravel arrived by the truckload. I hauled, spread, compacted. The surface slowly cohered, as though the road itself was choosing to exist again. Then one morning we stood and understood it already did. A clean gravel lane stretched between fence and shadow, gleaming silver at dawn. Not beautiful, not magazine-ready, just solid, truthful, real. The moment it became more than labor was simple. I eased the old Chevy from the barn and rolled onto fresh stone. No hurry, just enough throttle to feel the tire seat. The crunch was unmistakable. Each pebble settled like it had waited decades. No cameras, no gates, no eyes peering from behind trimmed hedges. Only a direct line from barn to world. Lane leaned on a shovel, arms folded, gave the smallest nod. The kind words would ruin. Ellie ran ahead, filming on her phone. Not for sharing, just for memory. When I passed, she smiled the way she had as a little girl, certain I could mend anything with time and tools. The lane curved through pasture, skirted the fence, and met county blacktop without once touching Clearbrook Meadows. No permission asked, no schedule obeyed. At the highway I stopped, hands on the wheel, breathing deep. A tightness I'd carried for months finally eased. That afternoon I drove to town midday, feed, parts, produce drop-off, conversations with folks I hadn't seen because rules had owned my clock. I returned 2 hours earlier than usual. Ellie and Lane sat on the ridge tailgate. I grabbed beers, joined them. We watched the sun sink behind the treeline, gravel glowing like wet river rock. Life felt recalibrated, not louder, just truer. I thought the hardest part was finished. I thought the existence of the road would be proof enough. I was wrong. The moment something real takes form, someone begins calculating how to claim or kill it. They didn't return with shouts. They returned with documents. It began with an email at dawn. Polite, helpful tone hiding a noose. Environmental review notification. No threats, only reminders of their duty to protect community welfare. By noon, a printed letter arrived, crisp margins, measured words that never said no but never permitted yes. 3 stated issues: erosion risk, new road supposedly altering drainage, threatening neighboring lots, ignoring Ellie's careful grading. Traffic safety, agricultural vehicles endangering residents, photos of my truck framed to look aggressive, dust exaggerated. Viewshed protection, bylaws mandating preservation of open horizon, and character people paid premiums to enjoy, as if low gravel could ruin sky. I read for subtext, not surface. They avoided calling it unlawful. They called it reviewable. I phoned the contact number. The woman spoke in practiced soothing tones, thanked me for cooperating before I'd agreed. I explained calculations, easement, surveys. She listened, concurred, then said the board required time to explore mitigation. What mitigation? Pause, deliberate. Access controls. Usage caps. Monitoring. I asked about jurisdiction over my private easement. She sidestepped. When impacts affect the wider community, authority is shared. Shared with whom? The next day, 2 men in khakis and clipboards appeared near the fence. Not officials, consultants. They photographed, noted, gestured at puddles older than their subdivision. That water's been standing longer than your covenants, I said. Then smile. We'll include that. Lane watched them leave. They're not investigating. They're scripting. Script: Lone farmer disrupts land, endangering safety and beauty. HOA nobly intervenes. Reasonable on paper. Responsible for appearance. Vague enough to convince outsiders. They missed the essential truth. We hadn't invented a road. We'd revived one older than their rules. Restoration threatens control far more than change ever could. Another letter followed, sharper. Temporary suspension of use requested during review. No deadline. Just indefinite temporary. I kept driving. Not defiance, necessity. Language escalated. Liability warnings. Insurance risks. Hints at remedies. I stood on the gravel one evening. Sun dropping. Stones cooling underfoot. Quiet felt observed, quantified. They no longer wanted the road gone. They wanted it owned without ever saying the word. Tuesday it arrived. Early morning, coffee hot. Planning hay to the south barn. Routine. Quiet. I rolled down our new lane thinking only of the weather. Around the bend I slammed brakes. Coffee hit the dash. Overnight a commercial-grade steel gate blocked the way, 12 feet wide. Black, posts sunk in still wet concrete. Keypad centered. Camera aimed at driver's face. Sign immaculate. Authorized vehicles only. Managed by Access Management LLC. Road access fee, $300 per month. No lawsuit. No citation. No arrest. Just a toll booth on my own work. I rested my palm on cold steel, stood motionless. Not rage yet, heavier. Quieter. The engine ticked cool. Silence turned hostile. Anger arrived in stages. First the chest burn reading $300, not maintenance, not safety, pure extraction. Then the phone, photos and clips spread before I reached the house. Comments ignited. Illegal, extortion. Tear it down. The advice felt good momentarily. Comfort in shared outrage. Gravity toward action. I pictured the chain, the tractor, and posts ripping free in seconds. Equipment ready. Right on my side. But the camera stared back. That shifted everything. The gate wasn't merely an obstruction. It was a provocation. They craved spectacle, farmer raging on video, headline pre-written. Lane arrived, saw the gate, said simply, "Say it." I walked to the fence, picked up a stone, set it down again, small anchor. If I pull it, I get 30 seconds of satisfaction. He frowned. If I don't, I said, nodding at the camera. Keypad, pristine lettering. I get everything else. Ellie appeared next. Silent at first. Studied angles, concrete depth, and sign hardware. They planned every detail. They want you to be furious. She looked straight at me. What now? That was the pivot. Not the gate, not the fee, but the instant someone who believes in you waits to see your choice. I breathed slowly. We leave it standing. Lane stared like I'd lost reason. You're kidding. Dead serious. I grabbed a tape measure, not a toe chain, tape measure. Ellie understood instantly. We documented dimensions, concrete color, camera placement, exact wording, timestamps. Anger didn't vanish. It gained purpose. That night comments surged. Don't let them win. I answered none. Truth absent from the outrage. Real strength isn't fury. It's restraint when everyone expects an eruption. I sat in the dark kitchen gate waiting outside like a dare. My father's tone echoed, not words, just patience. Never strike until you see the whole field. The gate was bait. The fee was leverage. The camera was their witness. For the first time since it began, resolve outweighed rage. If they wanted drama, they'd wait forever. I'd let the gate stand long enough to expose who erected it and why. When it fell, it wouldn't be my doing. It would be theirs, built on falsehood. The story broke sideways. Ellie's quiet video pan, the gate, steel, concrete, keypad, sign, LLC name clear. No narration. Hours later someone captioned, "Can they actually do this?" Another, "On his own land?" By dark it spread beyond the county. Farmers, haulers, people who'd battled zoning, water boards, developers. Different views, same agreement. No one should pay tolls to reach their own ground. The radio called. Reporter emailed. County tagged in comments. I stayed silent. Speaking hands them the narrative. Inside, the subdivision screenshots showed HOA group posts vanishing. Comments disabled. One leaked question, "Why is a private company charging fees?" It disappeared fast. Private messages arrived, anonymous, cautious. "I don't support this. Didn't vote for it. Feels wrong." The town felt it too. The feed store owner asked quietly. The co-op manager mentioned rumors. An old acquaintance warned, "They're calling you difficult." Difficult equals unwilling to obey quietly. HOA emailed residents. Not me. Reassuring of temporary safety measures and third-party management. Fee amount omitted. Company ownership omitted. My name is omitted. Lane brought printouts, screenshots. Flyers slipped under wipers downtown. Unregulated farm traffic threatens safety. My truck angled to look threatening. "They're framing you," he said. "I know." We spread documents across the table, video stills, LLC name, timeline. Ellie traced the sign text. Access Management LLC isn't HOA. It's a business. A business seeks profit, not harmony, not views, revenue. The $300 clicked into place. Suddenly shouting faded to static. I wasn't fighting neighbors anymore. I faced a revenue scheme, authority repackaged as service, sold back to those it binds. I didn't need to demolish steel. I needed to expose the machine. I shut off notifications, opened the laptop, not for arguments, for records, registrations, filing dates, addresses, principals. 3 days after installation, deliveries stopped. Supplier. County asked us to hold until resolved. White county truck appeared near the barn. 2 men, polite, clipboards. Multiple reports, drainage, sediment. From whom? No answer needed. They photographed Ellie's channels. Issued. Temporary hold pending review. No firm timeline. By nightfall, co-op called. Another buyer. Same careful language. No one wanted liability. The gate blocked my truck. Paperwork blocked everyone else's. Ellie laid notices flat. Lane leaned on the counter. Tense. "This isn't erosion," he said. "No. It's starvation by delay. Season slips. Contracts lapse. Livestock consume reserves you can't replenish." Numbers didn't lie. 6 days until collapse. HOA emailed residents again. Coordinating with agencies. Temporary inconvenience. Safety first. I stood at the gate that evening. The camera blinked red. I thought of every voice urging demolition. How satisfying the footage would be. How swiftly the narrative would flip. How quickly I'd stand before a judge explaining why emotion should override law. I went inside. Shut the door. The kitchen table became a war room. Ellie's laptop. Lane's extra chair. Stacks. Plats. Surveys. Emails. Notices. Highlighted lines. Ellie turned on the screen. Access Management LLC. Recent formation. Residential address. "Not commercial," Lane said. "Exactly." We pulled tax rolls. House owned by elderly woman. Fixed income. One more click. Last name matched the HOA president's mother. The room is still. A company collecting tolls on my road registered at the president's family home. No cheers. Just motive confirmed. Deeper. LLC formed 3 months prior. Same window traffic complaints appeared in HOA minutes. Same meeting, Access Management Solutions mentioned. Never voted. Boards can't create revenue streams without disclosure, votes, records. Yet invoices appeared, buried in expense lines. Third-party compliance services. Same figure monthly. They funded the gate with dues, then charged me to pass through it, routing money back to a family-tied entity. Not oversight. Racketeering dressed as governance. The clock showed 6 days. I called the county clerk, calm, curious. Reclassification request for the road? Filed by Access Management LLC. Denied the same day. No appeal. They knew no authority existed. Acted anyway. Sheriff next. Precise report of unlawful obstruction of public easement and private AG land. Photos sent. Case number issued. Paper accumulates. Ellie built chronology, dates, filings, screenshots timestamped. At night someone hung a grocery bag on an old fence. USB inside. No note. We waited till dawn. Plugged in. Clean files, HOA emails, minutes, memos, pressure tactics, access leverage. One thread. Restrict long enough, he'll negotiate. Another. Fee creates compliance incentive. Intent, not accident. Day 4. I called Grace Holloway. Grace arrived at sunrise in a plain gray Lincoln. Decades of miles, no flash. Black jeans, field and courtroom boots, blazer shaped by chairbacks since the 90s. Silver hair tight, eyes sharpened by 40 years of lies. No handshake, no smile. Show me. We spread everything. Deeds, plats, easements, emails, screenshots, LLC docs, USB contents. She read like an autopsy. Finished. No jurisdiction. Tap on the gate photo. Unlawful obstruction of public easement. LLC papers. Self-dealing. Yellow pad. 3 words. Emergency. Injunction. Hearing. We don't debate. We compel disclosure. 3 days later, courtroom smelling of old coffee and nervousness. Gray walls. Hard seats. HOA counsel opposite, sharp suits. Glowing screens. Prepared. President absent. Husband absent. Silence spoke. The judge entered, mid-50s, posture unyielding, eyes that valued precision over polish. Grace rose. Unlawful obstruction of public easement. Misuse of HOA funds. Coercive economic pressure. No theatrics. The opposing counsel smiled deflection. Misunderstanding. Gate installed in good faith pending environmental resolution. Grace laid county plat. HOA boundary stopped 71 feet short. The judge nodded. Reclassification denial. Filed and rejected the same day by Access Management LLC. The smile faltered. LLC registration, residential address, Martha Higgins, mother of HOA President Karen Vance. Murmur in the gallery. HOA dues funded gate construction. Fees routed through family-tied LLC. The room changed, not loud, totally. Grace placed the final exhibit, internal memos detailing strategy to restrict access, forced negotiation via financial duress. The judge read slowly, looked up at the opposing table. Counsel. Sit. He sat. Ruling crisp. Gate removed within 72 hours. HOA enjoined from claiming jurisdiction. Damages for business interruption. Formal financial misconduct probe ordered. Gavel once. Outside, cameras, reporters, residents. Karen Vance slipped out the side door. No comment. Brief glance my way, not angry now. Fear. The inquiry wouldn't stop at Steele. We drove home silent. The gate still stood, but already lifeless. Thursday morning, no fanfare. The county flatbed arrived. 3 workers. Here for removal. No ceremony. Chalk marks. Concrete saws. Generator hum. High whine. Sparks. Steel parted. Posts cracked. The gate settled into the truck bed, dull clang. The oldest worker wiped brow. Shame. I looked at the open road. Sun bright on gravel. No. Exactly right. They left. Dust settled. Minutes later, diesel growls. The same delivery truck turned away weeks earlier. The driver saw me, grinned. A small wave as he passed the empty space. Gravel answered. Life resumed. Ellie exhaled long-held breaths. Lane laughed quietly, relief. Freedom arrives not in explosions but motion. Aftermath is quiet. No press release. No apology. Inquiry proceeded, slow, thorough. The farm recovered. Feed on time. Contracts honored. Buyers returned as though interruption never occurred. One day Ellie said the county asked to name the road. Lane grinned. Anything but Clearbrook Extension. I thought of my father walking this ground before any of this began. Teaching patience. When to hold. When to wait. He's why I didn't tear it down, I said. Gravel stretched under sunlight between cottonwoods. Grayson Trail. Felt like the name had waited there all along. Weeks later the county posted a sign. Simple green plate, white letters, Grayson Trail. I drove it that evening, windows down, warm wind, steady engine. Past fields, past fences, past spots where steel once tried to define me. At highway I paused, hand on wheel, watching cars pass freely both ways. No rush, no barrier, only choice. People ask the lesson. Simple version. They brought paper to steal freedom. I brought better paper to bury them. Land outlasts committees. Labor outlasts rules written by those who never did it. Freedom isn't won by breaking things in heat. It's won by standing firm long enough for truth to finish the job. This ground was here before them. As long as breath remains, it will be here after.